Hello everyone and welcome to section 3 of the Seacoast Wrap Knit Along. We are going to start section 3 today. This is the transitional section, so we've started with color A. We've worked color A all through 1 and 2, and we've also worked a knit 2 purl 2 texture pattern. In sections 4 and 5 we are using color B and a lace eyelet pattern, so section 3 in the middle is really where we're transitioning both between the two colors and the two patterns. So far we've only used color A, right? Here is my color A. It is this light gray color. We are then going to move into my color B, which is a darker heathered gray color. Now so far what we've done has been very consistent. We are going to keep that consistency for the first few rows. The first 16 rows are going to still keep that garter row border, right? So we are going to keep the slit 1, knit front back, knit 2, purl 2 across, and then knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1 for these rows. This starts the transition. Row 2 will be the same as what we've worked before. It is really when we switch to color B after those rows where we start getting into something new. I have added an additional 15 repeats of section 2. I will try to show you here. So here is section 1 below this lifeline. We move through, we get to the next lifeline, that is all section 2, and then you can see here I've added some repeats here just to give it more length and try to use up more yarn. If you want to know more how to do that, I posted on the Facebook group as well as on my Instagram how to do that. Since this is a shawl that we are not doing any shaping in these sections, we can do it a lot easier, right? Because we're not changing the number of stitches, we are just seeing how far we can knit consistently. So I started off with weighing the yarn ball that I had when I was done with section 2. I weighed it, I knit an additional 2 repeats, knew I'd have enough, and then I weighed what was left. In that, I figured out how much yarn each repeat took. And the reason I did more than one was to try to average it out, just in case my tension was weird for a repeat or a row or something like that. Based on that, I know how much I need. I need an additional few repeats within section 3, so I subtracted those out based on the grams per repeat, and I knew that I could do approximately 30 more repeats if I really wanted to. That's a lot. That would add a significant length to the shawl, and I didn't want to add quite that much. So I did an additional 15, but I've marked that out, so hopefully by the end of it we can see where that extra length came from, and you can see in my sample and in what you're knitting where each section stops and starts. So what I'm going to do, now that I have my lifeline in here, again, so you can see here I'm using the same Galaxy yarn again. It happens to be in my bag next to my seat. I'm using lifelines at the start of every section. You don't have to. I'm doing it more of so that you guys can see what is going on. I am going to work the next 16 rows, since these are the same rows that we've used before, and then I will check back in. Hello everyone and welcome back. So as you can see here, I have finished the first 16 rows, or the first 8 repeats, using color A. We are now going to switch into color B. Now for all of these, I don't cut the yarn, I instead carry the extra yarn up the side. This gives me less ends to weave in at the very end in this, since my colors are very similar. It'll be very, very easy to do. However, in that blue and yellow sample that is in the pattern pictures, that also had colors carried up the side, so even if your colors are relatively bright and contrasting, you can still do that pretty effectively. So this is where we move from color A in texture stitch to color B in a lace stitch. Section 3 is all about going back and forth between a color and texture, right? So there will be varying rows of each one. The pattern goes over. If you actually wrote them out, it would be a Fibonacci sequence, if you were interested in knowing that little tidbit. So I am going to join in now my color B, and we will work the first row of color B. So this first stitch again is still slipped. We'll join in color B in a knit front back. This garter stitch border is still the same as is the wrong side. And then we will knit 2, and that finishes off our garter stitch border, same as before. And now we will knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together, and knit 2. And then repeat that. So a yarn over, knit 2 together, knit 2. And this continues across the row. All we are doing here is adding those eyelets. As you can see, this is still a 4-stitch repeat. So if you did end up making your shawl wider, you won't need to do any additional increases at this point to make sure that the stitch count works out. It is still a 4-stitch repeat. So as long as you increased by a 4-stitch multiplier, you should still be good. So we will continue this across with a yarn over, knit 2 together, knit 2, all the way across this row. The wrong side is still keeping your garter stitch border and then purling all the way across. We are still keeping it to a stockinette base. So hopefully once you get into these sections, it is still pretty memorizable and kind of a mindless knit, but at least it's not stockinette or garter. It has a little bit of interest thrown in. So, almost to the end of the row here. And then we'll go over some of the counts in the pattern. So like I said before, this is based off of Fibonacci sequence. You're actually starting out with 16 rows of color A, and you'll be ending this section with 16 rows of color B, with the accompanying change in texture. Alright, so now we've gotten to the last 4. We will knit 1, knit 2 together, and knit 1. And then on the wrong side again, we will slip 1, knit 3, purl all the way across until the last 4, and we'll purl the remaining 4. And that will be the first stripe of color B, as you can see down here. Now after that first stripe of color B, we are going back to A. Now we're not going for as many repeats, we're only doing 5 repeats here. And then we go back to color B, 1 repeat. And then 3 repeats, 2 repeats going to B, 2 repeats going to A, 3 repeats going to B, 1 repeat going to A, 5 repeats going to B, 1 in A, and then finally 8 repeats with color B, and that goes into then section 4. So that is the main difference going into section 3. We are finally transitioning into color B with our texture B. So I will see you guys in a week with progress pictures. I can't wait to see what all of you post. So, happy knitting, and I will see you next week.